In the year 2004, we had the first woman in Africa to win the Nobel Peace Prize. That was Wangari Maathai. And the continent was abuzz. Everything was good. People were celebrating. And the Nigerians saw what was happening, and they said they can't be left out. The next Nobel Peace Prize has to be a Nigerian. And so one person who was a farmer took his time. Every morning, people would see him in his farm, standing from morning to evening, and he was like, I've got to win this thing. So all those days, all those times, one person gained courage and went to him and asked him, how are you going to win the Nobel Peace Prize by what you are doing? And the guy said, don't you people read? The lady in Kenya won the Nobel Peace Prize for being outstanding in her field of operation. And so the guy felt that standing out in his field of operation was going to win him the Nobel Peace Prize. But let's put a comma there for a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, my team in Nairobi and the team which is here wrote for me a nice speech. And yesterday, I had an opportunity to talk and have a lengthy conversation with someone that I really respect and a mentor to me in this space. And the trajectory of my thoughts and all that I had planned to talk about were quashed. And I asked myself a very difficult question in the night, and I woke up with a totally different mind. And I want to really plead with my team to forgive me, because what I'm about to talk about is so different from what we've worked on for the last many months. We can be so theoretically right. As the doctor has just said, since I joined this space, we've talked about collaboration. We've talked about localization. We've talked about the need to build trust. We've talked about the last few years, the need for us to unlock domestic capital, the need for us to build an infrastructure that will act as a pipeline for that capital to achieve the impact that we want to achieve. Very well. And I have good notes, I have a good speech on that. But I think a time comes when we've got to ask ourselves, what really matters? We have a nice theme. We want to anchor systems in an era of transition. But are the communities that we are serving transitioning? Are they waiting for us to handle this transition that we are talking about? The answer is no. Their needs grow dire day by day. And so as we begin this conversation hosted in this beautiful space, there are difficult questions that we must ask ourselves. There are difficult conversations that we must have if we are to achieve the impact that we want to achieve. And so every moment in time, history normally creates moments. And every generation, and I look at us as a generation, we are normally confronted with choices, and we've got to make the right choices. Some of these choices sometimes can be to manage a decline or to create a renewal, a choice to preserve what is existing or to build totally new things, a choice to inherit a future or to build that future. And I want to challenge us to build a new future. A future that will not come before people the way we are now and talk about same things in every conference. I am happy because my contract is not going to be renewed, so I can now speak my mind. So this conference is a moment, and it's not because of what is in this room, but because of what is at stake outside of this room. And the question before us, Dr. Nugusu, is not whether philanthropy matters. It does matter, absolutely. But I want us to ask ourselves, as stakeholders in this room, that have we become better at managing poverty rather than creating prosperity? And as we receive an assignment as a generation, we've got to fight for liberation. And we are called collectively to build nations. Of course, we come from respective ones. But I would want us to have this conversation with a mindset of prosperity creation, with a mindset of dignity to the communities that we serve, with a mindset of, as I mentioned yesterday during the TED Talk, that in the next few years, we will be the ancestors that the coming generation will be talking about. What will they say about us? So, a few years ago, we've talked about Zanzibar, previous conferences. In Zanzibar, we spoke about emancipation. We examined dependency. If you watch the clip of Brian Kagoro when we were in Zanzibar, and you see what happened last year and the year before, then you could ask yourself whether he saw that future that we are talking about today as the present. And we talked about all those good things. We talked about how we need to shift our mindset. We asked how Africa could move beyond the perpetual reliance on external aid. And that is again what connected the conversations that took us to Kigali. In Kigali, we talked about systemization. We recognized that transformation does not happen through projects, that it happens through systems. And we took time to look at these systems, to look at the tools, the frameworks that would enable these systems to be put in place. But then here we are, as we meet in Addis Ababa, as we've heard from our doctors, the city that symbolizes African aspiration. And we are here to talk about power. Because emancipation without systems is fragile. And also systems without power is empty. So we want to talk about power. And we took the last 9 months to put together this conference. And we want to take time today to talk about capital. And tomorrow to talk about how that capital is moving to impact through an infrastructure. And on the last day, we want to look at how that capital is positioned. The communities that need to be engaged in all that, process. But I want you to look at it this way. And this is where my conversation yesterday comes in. Colleagues, if the Hewletts, and I'm here with my great friend Diahumba, if the Ford Foundation, my great mentor Margaret was here, if Hilton, the Fords, the Rockefellers, the OSFs were to be out of the equation, will we have a similar conversation in this room, in this conference? That's the question that I want us to ask ourselves. So in a world where Ford, the Rockefellers, all those people vanished, and what remained is you and me, would our ambitions survive? Would our institutions survive? Would our movements survive? And above all, would our dreams survive? And that is the question I want us to ask ourselves today on this day one as we unpack the capital and financing agenda. We'll be here tomorrow morning and we'll be here to talk about infrastructure, buzzwords. We've heard about this for years. But have we intentionally built systems whose sustainability depends solely on resources that we have no control about? Have strategies that will address, do we have the right strategies that will address the inequalities that we need to talk about, the structural inequalities, the systemic inequalities which are existing? And there are systems, nice words, we'll hear about them for the next 3 days. We cannot fight systems if we don't understand the sources of power for those systems. If we don't understand the organization of those systems, if we don't understand the mobilization of those systems, if you don't understand the resourcing of those systems. And so as we have the conversation tomorrow about infrastructure, I would want us to look at it from those angles. On Friday, Moses will be here to talk about what you are passionate about. What you talk about in the international space, the localization agenda, another buzzword. But the transformation of Africa, colleagues, cannot be outsourced. It cannot be outsourced. The liberation of Africa cannot be imported. Because wealth that is not created cannot be shared. And I want to make it a little bit sweeter, that wealth that is not created locally cannot be shared locally. And so when we talk about the localization agenda, then we've got to ask ourselves and angle our conversation around those key pertinent issues. And power that is not built cannot be exercised. Time is not on our end. And so I want to come to a close. If philanthropy is to transform Africa, colleagues, then as we've said for many years, we must reposition philanthropy to not be, or rather to become more than charity. It must become architecture. The architecture of opportunity and the architecture of institutions. Allow me borrow again from the conversation we had yesterday. And my great friend talks about Martin Luther and the famous speech, "I've been to the mountaintop." How I wish that we could each be in this room with the mentality of, I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen, until we see what the transformation, the structural adjustments that this continent needs, we cannot build that which we want to see. So can we go to the mountaintop and come back to this room in a matter of milliseconds and build the Africa that we want to see? And I want to invite you people to see that future that is yet to exist. For the Christians in the room, that is what faith is about, the evidence of things unseen. So can we sit in this room with that evidence in our mind and build that which we want to see? So the question is, what Africa will look like 50 years from now And that conversation begins today and begins this week. Will we build institutions that are capable of lasting for generations? Will we build endowments that can finance the priorities, the development priorities of this continent? Can we talk about and build policies that can democratize the opportunities that exist in this continent? Can we build ecosystems, as we want to talk about so nicely, that can create shared prosperity? And can we build leadership pipelines that transform wisdom, that transform values, that transform resources across generations, and have it done locally? Lastly, colleagues, this must be a turning point. A turning point in how we think about wealth and power. A turning point on how we think about philanthropy. A turning point on how we think about Africa. And when we talk about history, and when we talk about the opportunity that the current moment presents for us, and as we talk about that future that we want to build through the conversations, through the models, through the frameworks that we will unpack over the next 3 days, let this be a moment when we plant seeds whose shade we may not enjoy, but will exist to serve generations to come. And let that future generation say that we gathered, or rather they gathered in Addis Ababa. They saw clearly, they acted courageously, and because they did, Africa learned to thrive differently. Thank you. Thank you very much.